This podcast is brought to you by True Resources, connecting talented people with the best mining employers in the Australian market. For more information, head to trueresources.com.au.
So, hello, I'm Ben Kostrich, and this is the Market Bull podcast. Joining me today on the show is Jono King, the Chief Geologist of Trigg Minerals, which is listed on the ASX under code TMG. There's been a lot of activity recently, more so because of the recent antimony project in New South Wales and the acquisition there. So I've invited Jono on the show to talk all about it. So welcome to the show.
Great, Ben. Good to be here. And thank you for the invite.
Let's start. That's all right. Let's start a little bit with your background. We were talking before we started that you're a geo full and through, but let's talk a bit about how you got into it, your sort of, if I could say it, passion for the earth and the ground and the exploration side of things. How did your sort of origin and story start before coming to Trigg?
Well, I guess I grew up in Kalgoorlie and, of course, the heart of the mining industry. Everyone that was in sort of a friend of the family was involved in some capacity with the mining industry. And of course, you fall in love with the bush as well when you live out in a place like Kalgoorlie. And really, it just married everything up. And in fact, my background is a regolith geologist, geochemist, which again really unites that love of the land, the love of soils and landscapes and how they've all evolved. And I tied that all together to help, really minimize the impact of, I guess, drilling programs on the environment, because I'm a little bit of a greenie. I fell in love with just really the science of geology because it covers everything. You've got to know a bit of physics and you've got to know a bit of maths. You've got to know a lot of chemistry, a lot of biology, a lot of climate science. And it just marries things up, and it's always changing. It's still new, and therefore it's just absolutely a fascinating career for me. It's been a great career. I love it.
So where have you found the opportunities have taken you throughout your time? Have you found that there's specific resources or commodities that have been more in focus? I mean, being in Kalgoorlie, I can imagine gold would have been probably at the forefront, depending on when it was. But I mean, how have you seen the sort of evolution of the different commodities come in and out of focus?
Well, for me, it's been a little bit different because being a geochemist by background, I really have worked across all the commodities and, across most of the companies. So at different scales, so in the junior sector right through to the big boys. The work has taken me across the globe as well. So it hasn't, I haven't really been commodity specific, and that's one of the strengths that I actually have, and it's something that Trigg are of course taking advantage of, and that is that I've got exposure to a full range of commodities, and I can sign for most, and therefore I'm quite useful in that regard. I hope they also like me for my technical skills, but anyway, we'll see.
I love that. And again, the venture into Trigg, I believe you were doing some consultancy work initially, and that's the progression of how you now are the Chief Geologist. But talk us through how that conversation and even work started to where now you've got that title and that position.
Yeah, sure. So Trigg, of course, had the Drummond Basin project, which is a fabulous project, which I hope we get to discuss. Of course, there was an opportunity to pivot because of the Chinese essentially closing down the antimony space. And I had familiarity through a former life with a number of antimony opportunities along the East Coast. And I was approached by one of the directors of Trigg, who also had that exposure and shared that exposure. And he basically said, well, do you want to come on board and we'll pivot the company into antimony as well? So that was the decision, really. And we chased the Taylors Arm project. And from there, we moved to the Achilles project. And of course, as you correctly mentioned earlier, we used this point as a pivot and to reposition ourselves in the antimony space, because we knew that, this impact of the Chinese decision is going to be, long term, and we are going to see the antimony demand rise. We are going to see the antimony price rise for some time to come, and we thought, well, let's get in there while we can, and hopefully get a good position. And I think we've done that.
So I might just go in on the antimony side of things because we'll confess it's the first time at least it's come up on the podcast. And I know over the past, 12 to 18 months, there's been a lot of resources that have come into the forefront because of, I guess, China's hold on it. Talk to us a little bit about what this, I guess, occupation of the entire market that China has, and saying that they've made a decision. What is this really meaning for the antimony market across the world, and naturally the opportunity for Trigg?
Yeah, look, really the big thing about it is that, of course, Russia and China together were supplying about 80% of the market, if not even slightly more. Russia were essentially forced to withdraw supply from the market many years ago, but particularly with the Ukraine war. And then, of course, that meant China filled the gap. And then China ultimately decided that, it needed to preserve its antimony for itself. And that meant that essentially over 80% of the market, or supply to the market, was withdrawn from that market. And, when you look across the uses of antimony, which there are many, but I guess more importantly for us right now is the use of antimony in green energy, particularly in the battery space. And it's not just used in the antimony salt battery, the molten salt battery. It's also going to be used in conventional batteries as well. And there'll be even more select usages in time. You know, the dependence on antimony, like silver, like many other metals, is growing, and of course there is no supply available in the market. So eventually, the demand will drive that price even further, and hopefully companies like us will benefit from that. Governments are certainly across the globe. Western governments are certainly very aware of this coming shortfall, and they are looking to support the industry. So that's great. From us, it's ticking all the boxes, which is a great thing.
And this probably ties into now the New South Wales project and the acquisition. I mean, this coming across the desk, I can imagine the team would have been looking at quite a few options as well. And this one probably jumped out to the team. So can you elaborate a little bit more about this recent acquisition, and why is it so appealing to the team at Trigg?
The Achilles acquisition?
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. Well, I think the great thing about that is that, it came out of a company called Anchor Resources. Anchor did some very, very good work at the last sort of price cycle for antimony. And then, of course, the price collapsed, the project lost favor, and essentially they shut the door. But the great thing was that, they literally worked out the structure. They tested their concept, they proved their concept, they built a resource, and then they shut the door. And of course, that meant that we've basically inherited a project, an advanced play. It's got a JORC 2012 sitting on it. It's a nice high-grade ore body, which is only, at this stage, I guess, tested on a limited scale. And so the real opportunity for us lies in the down plunge projection of the ore body. With a limited amount of drilling, we can easily expand that resource, but we can actually expand the resource before that, because the original resource was done using was estimated using a cutoff of 1%. And of course, the antimony price was I think about $10,000 at the time, and now it's at 25,000. So, that's a 150% increase. And a 1% cutoff suddenly isn't required, and that cutoff grade will lower, maybe to 0.5%. We don't know, haven't really done the work as yet. But if it shifts to 0.5%, of course, that's going to expand the ore body significantly. We also know that there is an alteration salvage to the mineralization. That alteration salvage is also mineralized. That was never captured in the resource model. That can now be captured. So that's also going to expand the resource. And if you look at the resource itself, there is gold and tungsten in association with the resource, and they were never included in the estimate. So again, you've got other cost structures coming in, which are help the deposit expand and pay And I think it's just, for us, it's a fabulous, fabulous opportunity for that reason. And we've jumped from being really grassroots explorer into pre-development. And so it's a tremendous acquisition.
Yeah, massively. And again, there's been a fair bit of work done. I mean, the next steps logically for yourself and the team is to expand this resource. I mean, what are the plans and potential timelines to get this sort of work done? And I can imagine there's also permitting and some of those other requirements that need to be done as well. What's the sort of grand scheme of what people can expect, I should say?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think there's another point to be made here, Ben, and that is, as I said, the company worked out the structure, and they also recognized that because of the structure, there is potential for repetitions along strike. Now, there's 6 kilometers of strike within the tenure, and there are already a number of other high-grade positions that have been identified, which could replicate the replicates of the Wild Cattle Creek deposit. So, obviously Wild Cattle Creek will take our focus. We will move into drill as quickly as we can. And then we'll start to branch out and fill in the gaps along strike. And it's open in both directions, by the way, 3 kilometers either side. So, we've got plenty of space here. We've got plenty of work to do. The key thing is, as you said, access to the site. As we've just acquired the property, clearly, we need to sort the access agreement out, but only 20% of the property is impacted by private land ownership. The rest of it is accessible to us, so we can get on the ground and do work. But we also want to put in place a community engagement program. We want to be fully transparent with the community because, we have to be honest about this. Antimony it never travels by itself. It always travels with other metals, and they tend to be some quite nasty metals, like arsenic pyrite, so arsenic. You've got cinnabar, which is mercury. So you've got, some other nasty metals there. And obviously, you're in a very pristine part of the world. And so you've got to bring the community along with you. The community, may need a bit of education to understand that, the industry's moved on a long way. We're very committed to environmental best practice, and we're very committed to bringing the community with us along so that all stakeholders have a win. And, that's a process in itself that we must undertake.
Okay. Yeah, I
Sorry
didn't
for the
know
long-winded
about
answer.
No, don't be. I mean, I didn't realize about the potential other sort of nasties, but yeah, I think mining has definitely come a long way from just mining what they need and leaving the rest to responsible sort of destruction or removal of waste, which is now sort of paramount to any development. But more so, I mean, the land mass that you guys have got, I mean, saying you got 80% access straight away, 20% to be worked on. I mean, talking about that 80% available, to paint the picture, how much potential land mass is that you've got to really now analyze and figure out where you want to start, which I assume is based on the previous results that were done by the company.
Correct.
But what's the sort of land mass and then priority targets that you're going to start looking at?
Well, definitely the 20% that we're talking about, it does partly impact the deposit area. So, there's going to be a negotiation that has to happen there in order to open up that access. So we will initially remodel the resource, and we will take into consideration those points that I raised earlier, and we will then proceed to restate that resource. That's an obvious. We will then step out to places like Jezebel, where we've got a 1.3 meter intercept that went over 11% antimony. There's a number of rock chips around Jezebel that, again, are very high grade. So, that will be a clear focus for us. There's another historical mine known as Fletcher's Mine, which actually sits. So we've got Jezebel on one side of the deposit and Fletcher's on the other. And Fletcher's, again, features some very nice high-grade rock chips, about 8% antimony plus. So, we will work where we can, and we will clearly build the picture as quickly as we possibly can. But the focus needs to be getting in on that deposit area and converting as quickly as possible.
So active mines in the area must mean that some of the accessibility and infrastructure is already somewhat built. I mean, talking about that side of it, I mean, is the area known to be quite, enthusiastic about mining? I mean, what is the local community and even that area surrounding it sort of known for? Because a lot of groups or a lot of places were always known as gold or iron ore, and now it's the refocus is like, oh, there's these resources for batteries, and they've always been there. We were just never really interested in them.
The operating mines are actually more over towards Hillgrove, and Hillgrove is probably the closest as far as I'm aware. Um, and it's perhaps a little easier to operate a little bit further to the west, only because you're away from the coastal fringe. We are operating in the coastal fringe, and so of course, you're 40 kilometres from Coffs Harbour, and everybody knows how spectacular that part of the world is. So you've just got to be very careful, and you've got to work with everybody who's got an interest or a stake in that parcel. This ground, in terms of historical, this exploration, this ground has really only been known, I think, more as gold and antimony. I don't think there's been much other consideration. There may be some tin exploration because there are some late stage granites that have come through. But I think really it is primarily known and has always been known as an antimony district. And that's part of the reason why we went into the Taylors Arm area. And maybe I should just very quickly jump to Taylors Arm. As you know, the tenement is split in two. There's Upper Taylors, which is the northern block, and Lower Taylors, which is the southern block. Across the two blocks, there's 71 historical workings. And I'm going to make an analogy. We don't know if it's right or wrong. But if you look at Hillgrove, for example, Hillgrove in its day had a huge number of mines, 120 plus mines. And ultimately, it was through the consolidation of one company taking the bigger picture framework, they eventually managed to consolidate a number of those opportunities into different mining centres, which ultimately became the Hillgrove mine. And there's 5 or 6 different mining centres within Hillgrove, which is all under one operation. And we see that analogy as being appropriate for Taylor's Arm, where a number of these historical workings, which seem to have scale potential, might consolidate into a deposit, and we might end up with a series of deposits up through there that can be managed under us. We say that because the grade is quite large, very high grade up there. A lot of sampling was 25% plus antimony, and the exploration focus historically has all been concentrated around those workings. There's never been any big step out approach. So that's what we're going to do, the step out approach, and let's see what evolves.
So over the next, handful of months, I mean, what are the priorities to really continuously develop these projects and these assets that you've got in New South Wales and bring more news to investors? Because you've got a lot on your plate, I can imagine, and the team as a small company is quite, everyone has to do everything. How are you sort of balancing it or setting out the strategy going forward to keep people updated? And some of the initial news flow to come out, did illustrate that you had high grade results, but now painting the picture of the scale and potentially educating the market on antimony and the underlying gold and tungsten that you've got. I mean, that's quite a ask in itself.
Yeah, correct. And as you said, we are a small team. There's myself and a guy called Blake Collins. Blake's at this point sitting on a drilling rig up in the Drummond Basin. And we actually have engaged a group out of Queensland, Global Ore Discoveries, or GOD, and I'm happy for them to play God for us and locate these future resources as quickly as possible. So, look, it's not going to be just me driving the process. We have a very high-powered technical team in God who will assist us, and as we grow, and the focus will definitely be on the Achilles project to drive the share price, to drive the growth of the company. We will focus there, and then we will move into like the Taylors Arm and the Spartan project when that comes on board. and we will start to feed up the stories as
Mm.
they evolve. So I think there's going to be a very continuous news presence in the market, but we've got these, I won't say they're really, we've got to establish, as I said, the community engagement. We've got to get our permissions, our access permissions in order. And then once we've achieved these things, then we can move into this position where there'll be this steady flow into the market.
I like it without saying any religious spiel. In God we trust. That's quite a clever way to phrase it. But you mentioned earlier, and you mentioned again there, the Drummond Basin project. That's again in the company, and there's still activity going on there. So you've got that happening in Queensland, if I'm correct. Can you elaborate a little bit more about that project and really what it's about? Because from my research, there's a little bit, but I can imagine that the whole website is going through a massive undertaking an update, but there's still a fair bit happening there. So talk to us about the Drummond Basin project.
Yeah, well, the Drummond Basin project, the Drummond Basin is, to me, it's a very exciting play. And we're chasing primarily epithermal gold systems, gold silver systems, but also in a recent acquisition, the Boadicea ground that the chairman, Tim Morrison, picked up. We've managed to land some intrusive related gold copper ground. So those really are the principal styles that we're chasing up there. We're currently drilling a target. We're on our third diamond tail right now. The target's called Southwest Limeys. And we think that we actually have a Pajingo analog there. So, Pajingo is a 5 million ounce ore body. We've put 2 holes into it already. We see the same alteration. We see the same silicification. We're very excited by what we've seen, but of course we don't have any assay results as yet to measure up. But God are very comfortable with the target. We're very comfortable with the target, and we hope that it will deliver.
And then from a timeline point of view of getting those assays back, I mean, that's related to lab work and some of the other things, but what would be a potential timeline or expectation that we could anticipate some of this news coming again to the market?
Well, I would think that, we're in October. I would be saying that we're looking at those results in the sort of, unfortunately, as we come into the lead up to Christmas, early in the new year. So it's not a great time to receive those results. But, the great thing about Drummond is that there's about 7 or 8 projects up there. So again, when you consider that in addition to the New South Wales opportunity, that's a handful. We've got a lot of really good exploration ground under our control. And we've really need a bit of time to sit down and
prioritize.
Prioritize. Exactly.
Because I mean, as a small company, your resources are limited, and I know with a lot of them, you turn on resources as you see fit, more so from utility and staff and consultants. But looking ahead to the future, I mean, how is Trigg sort of positioned? Again, the financial department probably isn't your side of things, but how are you guys placed to go into the future with a lot of these projects under your belt and looking at that sort of priority list of how you're going to go about it?
Well, I think at the moment, really with the Achilles transaction, it was a script only, which is fantastic, which preserved capital. And the Achilles transaction, the Taylors Arm, I think, was mostly script. So they weren't huge cash burns in terms of the transaction. So that's great. So we've managed to preserve our cash that we have. I think we had about 1.9 at the last quarter. Obviously a diamond drilling program and RC drilling program, which is happening up in the Drummond right now, is going to burn a little bit of cash. But outcome will obviously derive an approach to the market again to recapitalize at some point. I think once we start to really present to the market what we have in terms of the New South Wales projects, then we'll probably have to come to the market at some point to raise more to support them. So we've got enough for now, but I think at some point you'll see us coming back to the market with our hands out, and hopefully people will believe enough in the vision to back us, and I think they will.
No, very well said. I think, it's been a tough time for a lot of small cap companies over the past period, but I think the looming issue clearly that's going around is that a lot of these resources, yes, we are sort of lacking this supply and discovery, and we need them to come online for all these wonderful technologies that we're all sort of desperately chasing. Period one being electric vehicles or solar or whatever it needs to be, and a lot of the focus from government down is that these resources need to come into focus, and funding through government and both investors is it's going to have to come back in. But I mean, encapsulating a lot of this conversation, if there was a few key points that you would urge investors and listeners to remember and almost identify with Trigg going forward into the future, what would you say those key points should be?
Well, look, I can't emphasize enough. I think that the Wild Cattle Creek acquisition via the Achilles project is a game changer for this company. Not many companies can buy an asset for really no cash out the door, a very cheap deal. Anchor did a great job. The database is in great condition. We can very quickly add value and substantial value via that project. And, this is I won't say it's a world-class deposit. I'm not going to use that sort of color, but it's a very nice looking deposit, and it's a very nice looking project. And I just think that if people can judge us by that performance there, and I think that they need to watch that space because it is a tremendous project with fantastic upside. I think Taylors Arm is also, again, another great acquisition, great numbers, but just the work hasn't been done. And I think once we can get in there, and I think on merit, on the basis of the work that we do at Achilles, you can see they're all new to me, so I'm sort of just wrapping my tongue around them as well. Hopefully then we can really expand our footprint and become a very significant player in the antimony space.
I like it. And I know a lot of the announcements have been coming through the ASX, so I urge people to go there. And as we were talking about before we started, I'm sure the website is going to be refreshed with all the up-to-date information and contact information. But for those that are interested in following the company and staying on top and potentially reaching out to maybe not yourself, but someone from the team to ask more questions, where can they go and how can they do this?
That's a very good question, and I'm so new to the company that I can't answer it. Well, look, I'm always available on my email, and I'm for those out there that are interested, I'm a jonathan.king@trigg.com.au. You're welcome to email me, and I will update you. Or there'll be, I'm sure, an info@Trigg, or there'll be something like that. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No,
Ben.
that's all right. That's all right. Again, I can't imagine it's your wheelhouse, but I'm sure that there are pathways there, and LinkedIn and Twitter is always a safe space. I think almost every ASX company now has to have one, some more updated than others, but I'm sure there'll be a lot of news coming.
The power of social media is incredible these days, and there are some companies that do it very, very well, and I think we're looking to improve our performance in that area too, so that we can keep the market informed and our shareholders.
Yeah, first and right. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jono. It's been your first time on the show and first time speaking with me, so I appreciate you taking the time from your busy day in the projects and in the field. So yeah, thank you for speaking on the show, and I'm looking forward to seeing what unfolds with Trigg and these assays that come in the new year and some of the other exciting stuff that's going to happen with the antimony. So thank you so much.
Yep, great, Ben. Always available. So just reach out, and I'll be there.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. Please remember that the topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial advice. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to like, share, and follow. You can follow the Market Bull on all our socials and keep up to date with global market insights.